Students who don't see themselves reflected in leadership, that one sends a message, right? Intentionally or not. It's about who belongs and who leads.
Welcome to Talking About Kids. I am your host, R. Bradley Snyder, researcher, activist, and author of The Five Simple Truths of Raising Kids. Ulric Shannon believes that students who do not see themselves reflected in their teachers and in the educational leadership develop harmful beliefs about authority, power, and value. Indeed, statistics show that the faculty in many school districts do not share the demographics or the backgrounds of the student bodies they serve. Ulric set out to change this. In this episode, Ulric and I discuss what he did, whether it is working, and how you can get involved. Talking About Kids is sponsored in part by the Arizona Department of Health Services Must Stop Bullying campaign through its Title V Maternal and Child Health Program. For more information, go to muststopbullying.org. You know, if this episode motivated you to examine educational leadership in your community, chances are it will motivate your friends and colleagues as well. So please like it and share it. And now, the interview.
I did not see myself going into education. I'm a Chicago kid through and through. I went to a school named Lovett, and I hated it. In my elementary school. um, but I had a dream as a young child to be the president of the United States. Like that is the job that I wanted. I just thought that they were the smartest people in the world. You had to work really hard to get there. I mean, that's a totally different story now as an adult. But I actually did not start to love learning and education until I got to high school. I was fortunate enough to go to a selective enrollment school in Chicago. Also saved my parents a lot of money because I was like, "Can you pay for this private school?" They're like, "We're really
Mm.
poor, but we'll try." But I had teachers who just poured into me and saw me in ways that did not see myself. For an example, um, I used to always get checks in elementary school for talking too much. And my teachers in high school were like, "You do talk a lot, but I think you would be great for the debate team." And being able to channel that into, um, into a sport that was really successful at, and that got me diving deep into education. So I was like, went to U of I on a full scholarship, a policy scholarship, studied at Oxford, all these things, multiple master's degrees, MBA, and came back to Chicago and thought I was a black little unicorn.
Mm.
And I was not. There was a recession in 2008, as you all know,
Mhm.
where I finished up my first master's, came back from Oxford, and could not find a job. It was extremely difficult, but my mother said, I mean, you got all these degrees. You need to get a job. Like now, just figure it out. And I ended up in the classroom. I ended up as a teacher. I was a third grade teacher on the far south side of Chicago where I taught all boys. And that is where I got the bug. I got trapped. I got stuck. And I will be in this work forever. I was able to see myself in so many of those young men in front of me every single day who really actually love coming to school. They love to learn. They love to be challenged. And I was
Mhm.
like, where does that change happen where we don't see our young black boys and young black men in that light? And how can I keep them excited about learning? And and it was from that point where I did a lot of things in education, where I went from a classroom teacher, led to work at Chicago Public School Central Office around family community engagement work, worked for a large nonprofit leading teacher recruitment throughout the entire Midwest. And it wasn't until one of my employers, a black woman, pushed Surge on me. She's like, "I think you'd be great for this. I think you'd be great for Surge." And she pushed me to apply. I did not think I was ready. I did not think I was at the caliber of the folks who did Surge. And it changed my life. It changed me in a way that once during the fellowship, George Floyd was murdered, and I asked my supervisor at the time, could I hold space for Black men? You know, COVID was happening, everyone was at home, you weren't at a school or a site to have these conversations with your colleagues. And she said, yeah, I think that'd be great for you to host that, but I think we should have an expert lead that. And so she recommended a Middle Eastern guy to lead, and I was a little bit taken aback
Mm.
and confused. um, and I decided to leave, and I launched a nonprofit education consulting company through another nonprofit here in Chicago. And I got the calling to come back to Surge as the ED. And so it speaks to the full belief that we have in our fellows and our alums to be 3, 4 years out of the program to come back to lead the organization is a true testament of how we walk and how we see our people and their genius and their brilliance. And so I got my bug starting with little third graders
Mhm.
almost 20 years ago. And I get to now pour into the adults who want to see more and more of our young people thriving in classrooms, whether they're the student or the teacher or district leader. And so I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. They're stuck with me.
Well, you mentioned Surge a couple of times, and now you are the executive director of the Surge Institute. Can you describe for the listeners what Surge is?
Yes, one of my favorite things to talk about, everybody, is the Search Institute. The Search Institute is a national nonprofit organization with a mission to educate, empower, elevate, and develop leaders of color who want to see and have transformative change for young people, for their families, and for their communities. And so we have programming across the country. It is a cohort-based model or fellowship model where a group between 15 to 25 educators, and I mean educators in a very broad sense, not just classroom teachers, but we have lawyers, we have superintendents, we have classroom teachers. And so we range the gamut. They go on this journey together to reimagine what school, what our education ecosystem could be to have the type of systems level change that not oppresses people, but empowers, lifts them up, and liberates them.
And that really does your response kind of dovetails nicely into my next question, which is I guess it's two parts. One, is there a lack of leaders of color in education?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've had a chance to work with districts across the country, and it's clearly a much more of a problem in some locations, some of our rural locations across the country. But even in cities like this, Chicago, which is extremely diverse, um, 82% of our students are students who are identify as Black or brown, and we'll say Black or brown as in Latino, Latine, Hispanic, while only 41% of our educators are Black or, according to like CPS data, they use the term Hispanic or Latine. And so there is a huge gap where we have students who may not see or have a Black teacher, or maybe only have a Black or Latine teacher at one of their classes. And there are some kids who have the bulk of them, but even in those spaces, these are Black and brown folks who were brought up in a district or a student like me of public education who are bringing their own experiences to those classrooms and need to unlearn some things so that they can actually serve students. So it is not just about the physical or the ability that I'm Black or brown. It is how am I showing up for the students in front of me? Um, whether it's through curriculum, my voice, my actions, my connections, relationships to them. So there's certainly a lack of diversity at the classroom level. And I will also say at the systems level, our leaders also lack in diversity.
So, how do you think
So,
students are being harmed by a lack of educators and, in particular, leaders of education of color?
yeah, I mean, one, students who don't see themselves reflected in leadership, that one sends a message, right?
Mm.
Intentionally or not. It's about who belongs and who leads. Um, I'm a victim of that. Like I will see a white leader and I'm like, yes, I trust everything that they do and I'm gonna run behind it. That certainly was me. But have had a lot of experience. I'm like, okay, it really don't matter your race. We all make mistakes, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But also, diverse leaders bring a lived experience that helps shape the cultural responsiveness of the policies and practices that we see in our schools or institutions. Um, and the lack of leadership and diversity is almost, for me, the default becomes assimilation as of over authenticity, and that is truly harmful for students' identity and their own development, where they feel like, even some of our adults feel like, they need to leave a part of their identity on the playground or the parking lot, and bring their representative to the spaces, and so that is truly. And then lastly, I mean, we could think about, like, the data shows, right? The data shows that students of color perform a lot better and actually feel safer when they have teachers or leaders who look like them and really truly understand their communities. When I led a school, I would tell my teachers all the time, like, great that you have a great relationship with the student, but you go back to your home. Like, have you shopped at their grocery store? Like, maybe the behavior would change if they just saw you at the local Jewel, right? Like, they know you are deeply committed out to them, out not just in the classroom, in the building, but you see their community, as a value, and having a relationship with them as well. So, truly a lot of harm that is happening when we have the lack of diversity in our leaders in education.
Well, you've started to mention a little bit about what Surge is doing, and we can continue to use obviously Surge, your organization, as an example. But I want to hear more about some of the things that we can do to support emerging education leaders of color. What are some of the actions, and what are some of these educators, in addition to that environment, those exchanges of ideas that you've described? What else do they get out of being, able to collaborate with other educators of color?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, like at Surge, I think one of the first things that we can continue to do is invest in those leadership pipelines for Black and brown educators. It's not, and again, not just at the classroom level, because we know we need more teachers across the country, but also at the systems level. How are we building that pipeline of our next leaders in those levels, to help change? And we know that this is an issue. I mean, we think about, Chicago Public Schools in 2000, 40% of the teachers were identified as Black, and
Mm.
now we're down to 21%. And so we have to change that. We need to build that pipeline and invest in those leadership pipelines. And Surge is doing this by, one, identifying and elevating those emerging leaders of color. Must do that, not just at Surge, but I think everywhere. You also have to create what we do here at Surge, is create a safe, brave space for them to grow, to heal, and to lead with authenticity. And we have to equip our people with the tools, the networks, and the confidence to lead, unapologetically. We think
Mm.
about some of the most powerful leaders, from Fortune 500 companies to school districts. Those are the folks who have the skills and the tools, but they also have the network to then have the audacity and the courage and the confidence to do things that we will be afraid of, because we're afraid of being judged by, or not having the right outcome that someone else is expecting. And so we must, help our leaders reconnect to their personal why. Why are they in this work? They have to be able to reimagine what is possible and believe in that. I talk about this all the time with my friends. As a kid, I used to daydream all the time. As an adult, I rarely ever daydream. That creativity is a real challenge for adults. So we help them reimagine what is possible, as opposed to focusing on what we believe is impossible. And then we have to force them and push them and believe in them to act boldly, in their communities. And I think starting with some self transformation, looking at the kind of impact that you can have in your community, ultimately leads to systems change, right? Which is, how are
Mm.
we changing the practices, and the policies of the things that we do? So lots of things happening at Surge that I think certainly can be replicated in organizations, districts, across the country.
How much of what you think you are I don't know the exact right verb, I'll probably get it wrong. How much of what you think you are, uh I'm gonna say correcting for right now, and if I've got that word wrong, you will correct me on
Yes.
that. But how much do you think that you are changing or shaping in these young leaders is a reaction to how they felt inside that same system?
Wow. Um, we get feedback directly from our fellows and our alums. We at Surge say that feedback is love, and we truly, truly believe that. So I'm welcoming of critical feedback, but also I want to know how this experience has transformed them. And so one of the things I can certainly say is for our last cohort is that 75% of those fellows reported advancing in their careers, either promotion or expanded responsibility, even before they graduated from the fellowship.
Mm.
Our organizations, our systems are seeing that impact from Surge, and this is why our application pool has grown substantially. From 2023 to 2024, we had an 81% increase in applications. Um, we also have 80% of our alums have initiated a community project or led a systems level change. And for almost all of our fellows, they report feeling a strong sense of connection and clarity around their own leadership. And so I can give you tons of data because we collect a lot of data from our fellows. We follow them. We have a robust alumni program where we love to hear the amazing stories and the impacts that they're having. So our current funders are not just funding Surge, they're now also funding Freedom Dreams and organizations that have been launched from Surge through our alumni. And so they're as strong and clear for us that there's an impact through the program of Surge, and it's truly working for our fellows and alums.
I'm those are amazing statistics, and I have no doubt. I know I've looked at other leadership organizations in different kind of fields before. I know how important they can be. I guess my question had to do with something that you started off talking about when you were giving kind of your history, and that was you were curious about how what happened between those 3rd graders that were so excited about learning and then how those same students gradually disengage. And and we know, and listeners are talking about kids know that there are all these reasons built into the system that slowly through a thousand through a thousand cuts, if you will, um, takes away that desire to learn and puts barriers between that student and what they ultimately know they could achieve, right? And
Yep.
so when you talk about having to elevate these young leaders of color and what I'm partially hearing is giving them back something that they let go of. That the idea that this is possible and that they have the same skills as everybody else and they have the same opportunities as everybody else. And so I guess my question was, have you been able to pinpoint when that went away? When these education leaders stopped believing that that next promotion or that next role or that next program that they believe is right, that they couldn't do that? When did that start being eroded?
Wow. I honestly think it started even before the incidents of the career path. And I think that can show up not just in the education space, but in every career field. If I could pull some numbers from Fortune 500 companies, like there are going to be very few Black and Brown folks who elevate to the top at the speed at which our white counterparts will. Like we know the data says that. So I
Right.
believe that that kind of that feeling starts a lot younger. It can literally start in the classroom setting. It can start where why am I receiving the type of punishment that my white counterparts or students are not receiving? Why can't I do the things that they can do? And so we internalize this over a lifetime. There, I don't believe it's just like a one kind of instinct that this occurs, but it is we are inundated with this from all parts of our life just as a young black man. Like, I thought I was super smart in high school, and I went to college, I'm like, "Whoa, like, okay, this is different." Like, "Oh, they're not talking about anything related to me." And I felt like I was starting my learning all over again and looked at them as experts and me as the learner, because I was so disconnected from some of my learning experiences, and that often is reflected. But for on the education end, when I think about the not just our young leaders, but then the young people that we are impacting, the hard part about that is educators, we all know, we don't necessarily see the true impact of our work. It takes 20, 25, 30 years
if ever.
because
Right.
if ever, a student who could get on my nerves today and show up late all the time could be a neurosurgeon in the next 20 years. And it could have been something I did to change them. And we may get penalized or feel a certain type of way we look at their outcome data, but that is outcome at the time, not full life outcome. And it's not a true predictor. And so we just want to be able to minimize that experience that I talked about earlier that many Black and brown folks have experienced in the classroom setting, that our young people are starting to believe in themselves, their ability, their genius, their brilliance at a much younger age and have a courage to hold on to that, sustain that through all types of systems that are gonna, try to pick at their belief in themselves.
Yeah, and I don't think we're necessarily gonna solve it in this podcast here,
No,
but
we are not.
I'm amazed at people that, as adults, are willing to go back into systems that may not have felt safe to them when they were a kid. And we know, we hear this all the time from schools. The parents don't come to parent teacher meetings because the parent's afraid to be in that school because that school reminds them of how they felt when they were in that school, and they felt unvalued, and they felt like it wasn't a safe place. It was a place that was taking something away from me. And now you want me to go in those same halls, and you want me to like advocate for my kid. I can't do it. I can't do it. So I have to imagine that there are a fair number of the people that like want to apply to the Surge Institute or even get into the Surge Institute that have that same feeling that they had to overcome those feelings just to walk back into the schools that they serve. And do you have any insights about how you help or how they were able to do that or how you help them do that?
Yeah, wow. I mean, I sometimes I'll switch my hat from the ED to a fellow and think
Yeah.
about my experience. But we want to tell people we want to try to eliminate any barriers
Mhm.
to their participation. Oftentimes, we have people to say, I don't think my organization is going to cover the cost of this program or support me with missing one Friday a month because they need me in the building every single day. It's like, no, let me talk to them. Like, they got the money, somebody's got it, and we will also help find the money to cover that cost. Because the thing with Surge, it's not just professional development. We've all sat through very boring professional development. We walk away, we don't remember anything. This is a personal transformation. We ground our program in kind of these four pillars that we talk about all the time. Head, like, we want to help you build your knowledge in the spaces where you need to build your knowledge, and we're going to bring in that genius that you already have into this space.
Okay.
We talk about heart. It is a healing space. So a lot of the things you do is a lot of inward focusing work about you, your experiences. What have I gone through? What makes me feel this way and doubt myself and question myself? It is also about hands, the practice of actually doing the thing. And I also say heart on a healing space is really about the emotional regulation. Like, everything is not personal. Everything is not an attack at you. We as adults, we have to model that regulation of our emotions. And lastly, it's about spirit, about the liberation and the feeling of being free that you want. And we create that in that space. So through these monthly sessions, we're going to talk about systems thinking and equity building design and storytelling and leadership and a bunch of other things. We pair that with coaching, like, they get an executive coach. And I don't mean just a person who I think is extremely smart and has been successful, but a person who is a certified executive coach, has
Mm.
done the hours to help the CEO of Starbucks to our classroom teacher. And so we want them to feel supported holistically and actually have access to a national network of over 400 alums. And so we do a lot in our fellowship that we hope then they take back to their organizations and replicate some of those same skills that other folks around them in their space and organizations can also feel. And then we can retain and keep folks because their genius could easily go to the tech space, right?
Right.
They can easily go do something else, but we want to keep them there. Even if they've had some poor experiences with education, it's like your hope and opportunity to change that because now you believe that you actually can with a great network of people to do so.
And how is, the Surge Institute, what's its role in plugging these gaps, this lack of teachers, period? Do you see that you were simply able to bring more teachers into these communities when they have a leader that comes from your institute?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say a specific number related to like bringing in a teacher pipeline, but I can say we have fellows who lead organizations and lead in roles that drive the force behind teacher
Mhm.
recruitment and forcing their teams to really think about the diversity of the teachers that recruit. And I could just give an example. I mean, I led a team across the Midwest who had to go out and recruit teachers from amazing universities. And even my team members that were predominantly white had no problem talking to the student body president of Oklahoma State to say, come and do this program, but were terrified to talk to the black leaders of the Divine Nine.
Mm.
And so it's like, okay, like how do we diversify this pipeline? And like what's your fear around that? Like you're literally having the same conversations you would with the student body president. And so Surge is like pushing people back out into this world to say, like, if this is an important piece to either retain, recruit, bring in more leaders, not just classroom teachers, but even in higher levels, how are you pushing your organizations to rethink their strategies and their approach to things? And so the way I look at Surge is every person who has done Surge is basically carrying a brick. And it's their brick, it is their power, it is their piece of changing the system. And now we got 400 plus, almost 500 bricks to really build this thing that is impacting that system from all angles without us forcing to just go down one pathway. And I think once people start to see Black and brown folks in different leadership roles across different parts of the education ecosystem, people will be like, wow, like actually, I want to get into education, right? I want to be a teacher. I want to be a school leader. I want to be this because I can see myself with the leaders making an impact, making a change. And I deeply believe that all of these roles deserve to have a much higher pay. And that's a whole nother podcast. But I think just being able to see people who are making impact and truly love the work that they do, will drive people back into this field because this was the place to be as a Black person back in the day.
Oh,
You got
yeah.
a college education, you became a teacher, and the community worshiped you. They appreciated, they respected you. And we're going to get back there. We are.
It actually it makes me think, W.E.B. Du Bois in the exhibit that he put on for the, World Fair in Paris in 1900. One of the measures that he included of the success of post-Civil War, the United States, was the number of Black teachers. He had several, graphs in his wonderful, wonderful presentation, showing. Unfortunately, we've slid. Actually, it seems like it was an amazing trajectory that we started here in the United States, and then something happened. But that leads me into this next question for you, which is, what's your vision for the future of education in the United States?
Some are simple, some are maybe a little bit
Hmm.
more complex. I say, I think one for me, just in recent conversations, just hearing the news, I want a system where equity isn't a buzzword anymore. Like I'm so tired of just hearing the word. We make it a monster. We make it the great thing. Like it should no longer be a buzzword. It is truly just the baseline for what we do, how we live. Um, I also want one where every child is taught by someone who sees them, believes in them, and reflects their brilliance back to them. And so it's not just about a great teacher who knows the great content, but they know, they value, they love their students in front of them. I also want a place where, as a person who led family community engagement work, where decisions are made with the community, not just
Mm.
about them. I often hear school leaders are like, "We need volunteers," and I'll say, "Well, what do you need them to do?" And they're like, "Well, there's a lot of like, I don't know what I need them to do." Like, get really clear on what you want them to do, and I'm pretty sure families will truly show up. It happened in my classroom. I had math Mondays, started with 3 families showing up. By the end of the year, I had 80% of my students had at least somebody showing up because they care about that child, and so they bring them in into the and into how we make decisions that impact them. So that proximity. And then I would say where leaders of color are no longer the exception. Um, we often feel like we're fighting for that one slot, that one opportunity,
Mhm.
when they are really the architects of the transformation that we want to see. And so those are the things that I personally want to see in education. And I think once we do all of those, we would see the type of academic outcomes that we would want to see for students. We're chasing that without thinking about the people that have to show up in front of those children every single day to do their best work. They're fighting to the test, right?
Mhm.
Or something tactical that the school wants them to do. And so I think we need to just take a little bit of a step back. COVID should have forced us to do that, but I also feel like we're going back to business as usual. And so the more we can pour into our people, is the best way we can actually pour into our young people in our classrooms, and ultimately who will lead us one day.
Ulric, I want to thank you so much for deciding to make this your career, even though it wasn't maybe what you started out with. And thank you so much for being a guest on Talking About Kids.
Thank you so much.
That was Ulric Shannon. More information about Ulric and the Surge Institute is at talkingaboutkids.com. And when you do visit talkingaboutkids.com, send me a note. Let me know what you think. I read every bit of feedback. The Talking About Kids theme song is by the Senators. For more of their music, go to thesenatorsmusic.com. And remember, kids are young goats and young humans. And the difference is that young goats are easier to manage.